Alright, YouTube, did you watch Trump's speech? I did. I watched the whole thing from start to finish. And it was legendary. No, this is a Trump. If you looked out onto the crowd and you saw poor Nancy Pelosi's face, the reason she looked uncomfortable, like she was about to pass out or break out in a sweat, had nothing to do with the fact that she doesn't personally like Trump. That's on the back burner at the moment. I think it had more to do with the political prospects of her actual party. Because watching what Trump did tonight was like watching someone who you completely and utterly discounted suddenly win something. Somebody who comes totally from behind and accomplishes something you didn't even think within their physical realm of possibility. The Democrats and the media and many others for some time now have portrayed Trump as utterly off-kilter, incapable of following a script, incapable of encouraging unity, incapable really of doing much of anything other than being Adolf Hitler, or so they claim all the time. Tonight, though, we saw a Trump that delivered a speech that was at least as good as anything Reagan ever did in his more lucid moments, possibly better than much of it, and is probably the greatest political speech we've seen since the 1980s, honestly. I mean that. Herbert Walker never delivered a speech that good. George W. never did. Bill Clinton, I guess, kind of came close at times, but not quite. Obama's the other only significant speaker that we've had in the last few decades. And even he, again, reverts to wedge issues in most of what he says, or at least he began to very shortly after being elected. His debating skills were good. Trump's were maybe less so. But what Trump did tonight is call for unity, tell people essentially a new chapter has begun, it's time to stop thinking small and it's time to start thinking large. We're not warmongers. I don't have a problem with other countries, I just ask that they be fair. I don't have a problem with immigrants, I just ask that they be legal. And essentially laid waste to most of the arguments that people were making about why he was supposedly a bad person. And he did it in an hour. He did it seamlessly. Yeah, I don't think a lot of people expected that. Even a lot of Trump fans thought he was off-kilter. Oh, yeah, he speaks off the cuff. And so sometimes he makes mistakes. He didn't make any mistakes here. His delivery was virtually perfect. What he said was virtually perfect. There was one moment at the very end of the speech, I wonder if you caught this, where he waved his hand over towards the Democrats and talked about mistakes of the past, I think it was, or was he talking about obstruction and partisanship? And a few people started to boo him, and as he progressed, because he realized he could just talk over them, it shut them up real quick now, fucking didn't it? It was great. Oh, this was a masterpiece to watch. This was way better than Trump at a rally. This was way better than Trump at the debates. This is better than Trump announcing something, or even holding one of his kind of press conference style victory speeches during the late primaries, which were admittedly good. Those were more on point than some of his more off-kilter moments. But this was way better. This was a cut above anything else that Trump has done insofar as his public speaking goes. And he knocked it out of the park. The reason why the Democrats started to very quickly jog out of the room as soon as he was done without giving him a final round of applause had nothing to do with the fact, oh, I don't like him because he's a Republican. I don't like him because he's calling for the repeal and replacement of Obamacare. They don't care about that. They started running out because they're about to go to the bar and get wasted. Or they're about to go back to their congressional apartments like a bunch of frat boys to hang out with the other Democrats to try to, before their minds melt down, to try to plan some sort of strategy to deal with someone they completely and utterly underestimated. They completely underestimated him. I'm telling you that right now. They're probably looking back wishing they didn't nominate Tom Perez as the head of the DNC going into a period of time when they know Trump is going to do this again. If he's capable of doing it once, he gets a positive reception. Even the media right now is like, yeah, this is a pretty good speech. And those are groups that virulently hate him. Even they're willing to say it was a good speech. What do you think's going to happen to the Democrats over the next few months? Trump is going to browbeat them into the ground. It's going to be masterful. Herein lies his grand strategy. And the thing is, he was always capable of speaking like that. It's just he chose not to. He spoke off the cuff to the average person because he knows that's what they want to hear, at least delivery-wise. His message has remained astonishingly consistent from day one to now. He's not changing that just to fit the audience. A lot of politicians do that. He learned differently. He's not going to change the message, he's going to change the delivery. Bravo! Perfect strategy. You just undercut the entire Democratic Party, and you could tell, looking out upon their faces. It wasn't the normal, oh, we're sad our party's not in power. Our candidate's not the one speaking to us right now. We've seen that many times before. It was a lot more than that this time around. Trust me. When he talks about Harley Davidson and their motorcycles on the White House lawn, and he talks about speaking to them about how their sales are going, and they say, oh yeah, sales are fine. Then he asks them about foreign sales, and they say, oh well, it's getting harder and harder. And then he comes out and says, they're not asking for change, but I am. That was probably the most powerful line of the night, because there's everyone who's employed on board with Trump, honestly, unless they're a total bitter partisan or extremely ideologically to the left and think he's Adolf Hitler. That was a score number one, and it was a brutal hit to his enemies. You could tell the crowd went wild. Even a lot of the Democrats were clapping at that point. Then he talks about Obamacare, sticky issue for the Democrats. A lot of them were thumbing him down during that segment. You probably saw that, depending on which stream you were using at the time. But at the same time, did they continue thumbing him down when he talked about taking care of the very poor and making sure that people with pre-existing conditions didn't lapse? Which is something I said, yeah, he's not going to let them lapse because he's going to end up killing 1 million people. He's not that fucking crazy. You'd have to be a total lunatic to do that. It was never in his MO to make such a decision. He was always going to preserve their health insurance. He's willing to accept that. He doesn't have a problem with it. And all of a sudden, the Democrats, once again, they're forced to clap him. What are they going to do? Sit down? They're going to sit down during his whole speech. They're not going to clap for the war veteran, or the widow, rather, of a dude who died in combat. They're not going to clap for the idea of continuing to cover pre-existing conditions. They're not going to clap for X, Y, and Z. It is never a possibility. He had them up and clapping sometimes. And we've seen periods of time before, by the way. We've seen speeches by past presidents, Bush famously, where nobody clapped for anything he said. They zoned out. Even members of his own party just sat there. They didn't want to be associated with him. You didn't see that tonight. You saw a totally unified Republican Party. You saw what I think is a slightly fractured Democratic Party, in which some people repeatedly cheered him on, actually, because what he was saying was not particularly partisan, and he delivered it well. And he did so largely, 99% of the time, without doing anything in the way of attacking the other party, and instead saying, hey, work with us. We can't do the partisan thing anymore. It's not going to work. It's not going to benefit anybody. And the American people watching this, again, unless they're bitter partisans, the average non-aligned voter, the average independent, a growing block of voters watching this, says now the ball is in the Democrats' court. Because he's already offered to work with them. He's taken the moral high ground. Scott Adams, I'm sure, will be tweeting about this anytime. He took the moral high ground. Hey, come work with us. Take my hand. We'll make America great again. Now, I'm not saying that I'm going to shaft all you people. I'm not saying I'm not willing to work with the Democratic Party. I'm just saying let's be, friendly with each other and try to get something done because past administrations haven't. And you notice he never called out Obama specifically. He said past administrations. That's because he'd like to call out Bush too. But as long as people like John McCain are in the audience, I suppose he thought that wasn't the greatest idea in the world. This was a great, not a good, not an acceptable, a great speech. It hit every point that he needed to make, and it did it well. And I think at this point, yeah, the Democrats, half of them are already drunk right now. Half of them are already totally inebriated. Some of them are probably already passed out in the White House lawn or something. It's probably where they are. They're in their apartments having, sexy time or snorting cocaine right now to try to get over the pain of what they've just had to witness. Oh shit, Donald Trump is actually a really good speaker. We're in 2020, we're going to be running against the next Ronald Reagan. What the fuck are we supposed to do? And you could see their expressions. Nancy Pelosi, though, If you could encapsulate the entire speech in one image, it would be Nancy Pelosi's very sweaty looking, extremely nervous face. It was worth 10 billion words. That one image, it will be seared into my mind for some time, of Nancy Pelosi sitting there leaning back in her seat, awestruck. She didn't even know what was happening. That's how retarded she really is. So kudos to Trump. You just it made me feel quite happy to watch the reactions from all of the left authoritarians on the other side, even if you're offering to work with them at the time, knowing full well, of course, Trump does, that a lot of them are controlled by people that hate him and will never work with him. That means they get screwed. They can't even do anything in the way of maneuvering. They can't change their decisions. They can't work with him. They're too bought and sold and corrupted already. And now they're screwed. Yeah, it's going to be a difficult time for them, just as it'll be a difficult time for people like Lindsey Graham, who wishes that he was at the buffet at the time. He wishes he didn't have to go and pretend to care what Trump had to say, but poor Lindsey Graham won't be in office very much longer because he won't be reelected, let's face it. That's about all. Peace out.